They thought they were stopping a stranger. They had no idea they were stopping someone who knew the law better than they did. The quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, looked like any other road on a late evening. The sun had already disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving only the soft glow of streetlights and the sound of passing vehicles in the distance. Behind the wheel of a simple sedan was Marcus Reynolds, a man who appeared completely ordinary to anyone looking from the outside. He wore a plain jacket, drove a regular vehicle, and showed no signs that he belonged to the world of law enforcement. There was no uniform, no badge visible, no reason for anyone passing by to know that Marcus had spent years protecting the same community he was now driving through. For most people, he was simply another driver heading home after a long day. But appearances rarely tell the complete story. Marcus Reynolds was a sheriff's deputy with years of experience serving his county. His career was built on patience, discipline, and the belief that every person deserved to be treated with respect. He had responded to countless situations where emotions were high and decisions mattered. He had learned that the strongest professionals were not the ones who demanded control. They were the ones who understood responsibility. That evening, however, Marcus was not wearing his uniform. He was not on duty. He was simply enjoying a quiet drive home. Then the flashing lights appeared behind him. Officer Daniel Whitmore, a white police officer patrolling the area, noticed the vehicle ahead and decided to make a traffic stop. From his perspective, it was a normal part of the job. A vehicle had caught his attention, and he wanted to check the situation. Nothing about the moment suggested that it would become memorable. Nothing suggested that the person inside the car would challenge the way he viewed the world. Marcus pulled over calmly and waited. When Daniel approached the vehicle, Marcus lowered the window and greeted him politely. "Good evening, officer." His voice was calm. His attitude was respectful. There was no argument, no frustration, and no attempt to avoid the conversation. Daniel began with routine questions. Marcus answered clearly and provided the information requested. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like a simple traffic stop between two strangers. But beneath that ordinary moment was a much deeper story. Daniel saw a driver. He saw a situation. He saw a person he did not know. What he did not see was the years of service behind Marcus's quiet expression. He did not see the countless hours spent learning the responsibilities of protecting others. He did not see another professional in the same field of law enforcement. Marcus understood something Daniel did not yet realize. A person could carry a lifetime of experience without showing it on the outside. A person could represent the same values as the badge in front of them, even when nobody recognized them. The road remained quiet. The evening continued. But a simple traffic stop was about to reveal a lesson neither man expected. Because sometimes the person who looks like a stranger is the person who understands the meaning of the law the most. The first few minutes of any encounter can reveal more about a person than years of conversation, but only if people are willing to look beyond their assumptions. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, Officer Daniel Whitmore continued what he believed was a routine traffic stop. The vehicle was parked safely on the side of the road, and the driver inside remained calm and cooperative. From the outside, nothing about the situation appeared unusual. But the difference between what Daniel saw and what was actually true was growing with every passing moment. Marcus Reynolds provided his information without hesitation. He answered each question clearly and respectfully. He understood the process because he had spent years working within the same system. He knew that officers had responsibilities. He knew that questions were part of their duties. He also knew that every person deserved to be treated with fairness while those duties were being carried out. Daniel looked over the information in his hands and continued the conversation. "Where are you coming from tonight?" he asked. Marcus answered, "Honestly, I was finishing some personal errands and heading home." His response was simple. There was nothing unusual about it. Yet Daniel continued studying the situation, trying to understand why the driver seemed so calm. What Daniel did not know was that Marcus's calmness came from years of experience. As a sheriff's deputy, Marcus had learned that patience was one of the most important tools in public service. He had seen people react emotionally during difficult moments, and he understood how quickly a situation could become more complicated when people stopped listening to each other. That was why he chose to remain respectful. He believed that professionalism was not only about how someone acted when things were easy. It was about how someone responded when things were uncomfortable. Years earlier, Marcus had made the decision to dedicate his life to serving his community. He remembered his first days in law enforcement, when he was still learning the importance of responsibility and trust. He understood that a badge was not a symbol of power over others. It was a promise to protect and serve. That belief shaped every decision he made. But standing on the roadside that evening, Marcus experienced something he had seen before but never accepted as normal. A person could be judged before their full story was known. Daniel noticed that Marcus did not seem nervous. He did not seem confused. He seemed certain that the situation would be handled fairly. That confidence created questions in Daniel's mind. Why was this driver so composed? Why did he seem to understand the process so well? The answers were right in front of him, but he had not discovered them yet. A few passing cars moved along the highway, unaware of the quiet conversation happening nearby. To them, it was simply another traffic stop. But for Marcus and Daniel, it was becoming something much bigger. One man was looking at another person through the limited information available in that moment. The other man was carrying a lifetime of experience, hidden beneath an ordinary appearance. And as the conversation continued, the truth about Marcus Reynolds remained just beyond reach, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The hardest truths are often hidden in the moments when nobody expects anything unusual to happen. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, Officer Daniel Whitmore continued speaking with Marcus Reynolds, still unaware that the person standing before him represented the same values he believed he was protecting. The traffic stop remained calm, but something about Marcus's presence created a feeling Daniel could not fully explain. There was a level of patience and confidence that did not match the image he had created in his mind. Marcus answered every question respectfully, but he also understood something important. A person could follow every instruction and still be judged by assumptions that had nothing to do with the situation. That reality was something Marcus had experienced throughout his life, long before he became a sheriff's deputy. His journey into law enforcement began with a simple belief. Communities were stronger when the people protecting them understood the people they served. When Marcus first joined the department, he was not looking for recognition or authority. He wanted to make a difference. He spent years learning the responsibilities that came with wearing a badge. He learned how to communicate during difficult moments. He learned how to listen before making decisions. He learned that trust was not created by a uniform. It was created by consistent actions. Over the years, Marcus became known among his colleagues as someone who remained calm under pressure. Younger deputies often looked to him for guidance because he understood that leadership was not about having the loudest voice in the room. It was about making thoughtful decisions when emotions were high. Those lessons followed him everywhere, even when he was not wearing his uniform. That evening on the highway, Marcus was not thinking about his position. He was not thinking about explaining who he was. He simply wanted the situation to be handled fairly. Daniel, however, continued trying to understand why Marcus seemed so comfortable during the interaction. The officer had encountered many people during traffic stops, and he believed experience helped him recognize situations quickly. But experience could also create mistakes when people stopped searching for facts and started relying on assumptions. Marcus noticed the questions becoming more detailed. He noticed the tone becoming more serious. Still, he remained composed. He knew that reacting emotionally would not improve the situation. He believed that respect could create understanding, even when people started from different perspectives. The evening air remained quiet around them. The highway lights reflected across the road as vehicles passed in the distance. To anyone watching, it was simply another roadside conversation. But beneath the surface, something much deeper was happening. Daniel was beginning to encounter a lesson about judgment. Marcus was once again facing a moment where his identity was hidden behind first impressions. Neither man knew exactly how the night would unfold. But one thing was becoming clear. The person Daniel believed he was evaluating was actually someone who understood the responsibilities of the badge just as deeply as he did. And soon, the truth behind Marcus Reynolds would change the entire meaning of the encounter. The moments that reveal the most about people are often the moments when they believe they are simply doing what they always do. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, Officer Daniel Whitmore continued his conversation with Marcus Reynolds, still unaware that this ordinary traffic stop was becoming a reflection of something much larger. The vehicle remained parked along the roadside. The evening remained peaceful. Yet the difference between what Daniel believed he was seeing and what was actually true continued to grow. Marcus stayed calm as the questions continued. He understood the process. He understood the responsibility behind the badge in front of him. But he also understood something that many people only learn through experience. A person can follow every rule and still be judged before anyone knows their story. Daniel looked over the information again and asked another question. "Are you currently employed in this area?" Marcus answered honestly. "Yes, I work in public service." It was a simple answer, but Daniel noticed something about the way Marcus spoke. There was confidence without arrogance. There was respect without fear. Marcus did not try to use authority he had not revealed. He did not mention his position as a sheriff's deputy. He believed that fairness should not depend on a person's title becoming known. That belief came from years of watching how people responded to power. Marcus had seen leaders who demanded respect because of their position. He had also seen leaders who earned respect because of their actions. He always wanted to be the second kind. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned that the badge he carried was not a symbol that placed him above others. It was a reminder that he was responsible for serving others. That was why he remained patient during moments when others might have reacted differently. But Daniel interpreted the situation through a different perspective. He saw a person who was calm during a conversation that, in his experience, often made people uncomfortable. He wondered why Marcus seemed so prepared. He wondered why the driver appeared to understand the process so well. The answers were close, but Daniel was not ready to see them yet. The road remained quiet as the conversation continued. The lights from passing vehicles moved across the pavement, creating brief moments of brightness before disappearing into the distance. Neither man raised his voice. Neither man created a scene. The tension came from something much quieter. It came from the gap between perception and reality. Marcus knew exactly who he was. Daniel only knew what he could see. And that difference mattered. Because throughout history, some of the biggest misunderstandings have happened when people believe they already know the full story. Marcus remembered that every person had moments when they were judged before they were understood. He also knew that those moments created a choice. A person could respond with frustration, or they could respond with purpose. He chose purpose. Daniel continued reviewing the situation, believing he was simply following procedure. He did not realize that the person he was questioning had spent years studying the very responsibilities he was trying to uphold. He did not know that Marcus Reynolds was not just someone who understood the law. He was someone who had dedicated his life to representing it. And as the night continued, the truth remained hidden for only a little longer. Sometimes the truth does not arrive through a dramatic announcement. Sometimes it appears through a small detail that changes the way everyone sees the situation. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, Officer Daniel Whitmore continued speaking with Marcus Reynolds, still unaware that the person in front of him carried a connection to the very system he represented. The traffic stop remained calm, but the meaning behind it was beginning to shift. Marcus continued answering questions with patience. He understood that Daniel had a responsibility to follow procedures. He also understood that responsibility required fairness and respect. Those two ideas were supposed to exist together. But as the conversation continued, Marcus began noticing that Daniel was focusing more on assumptions than answers. Daniel looked at the information again and asked for additional details about Marcus's background. The questions were not unreasonable by themselves, but the tone created a different feeling. Marcus had experienced moments like this before. He knew that sometimes people formed opinions before they had all the facts. He also knew that reacting emotionally would only make the situation more difficult. So he remained calm. That calmness came from years of experience. Marcus had spent his career learning how to handle complicated situations without allowing frustration to control his decisions. He had worked with people from every background. He had seen misunderstandings happen. He had seen how quickly trust could disappear when people stopped listening to each other. That was why he valued communication above everything else. Meanwhile, Daniel continued believing he was simply being careful. He believed he was noticing details and protecting the community. But he did not recognize that the most important detail was the person standing in front of him. Marcus was not just someone being questioned. He was someone who had spent years helping others understand the importance of fairness. He was someone who knew that every interaction between law enforcement and the public carried meaning. The difference was that Daniel did not know this yet. A few minutes passed. The highway remained quiet. The lights from nearby vehicles moved through the darkness while the two men continued their conversation. Then something unexpected happened. A vehicle approaching from the distance slowed down near the roadside. The driver looked toward the scene and recognized Marcus. It was not because of his appearance. It was not because of his vehicle. It was because the driver knew his name and knew the work he had done in the community. The driver immediately understood that this was not just another traffic stop. The person standing there was a fellow member of law enforcement. That small moment began changing everything. Daniel noticed the reaction and became curious. He looked toward the approaching vehicle and wondered why someone seemed to recognize Marcus. For the first time that evening, a question entered his mind that he had not considered before. Who exactly was the person he had been questioning? Marcus remained quiet. He did not reveal his position. He did not interrupt the process. He allowed the truth to arrive naturally, because he believed something important. A person's value should not depend on whether others already know their title. It should be recognized simply because they deserve respect. And soon, Daniel was about to discover that the man he thought he understood was someone he had never truly seen at all. The truth about a person is often hidden behind the details that others fail to notice. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, Officer Daniel Whitmore was beginning to realize that the situation in front of him was not as simple as he first believed. The driver he had questioned for several minutes was no longer just an unfamiliar person on the side of the road. There was something about Marcus Reynolds that made the people around him react with recognition and respect. Daniel watched as the approaching vehicle stopped nearby. The person inside stepped out calmly and greeted Marcus with familiarity. It was clear that they knew each other, not because of a personal friendship, but because they shared a connection through public service. Daniel listened as the conversation revealed a detail he never expected. Marcus Reynolds was a sheriff's deputy. He was not someone unfamiliar with law enforcement. He was someone who understood the responsibilities behind the badge because he carried those responsibilities himself. The realization changed the atmosphere immediately. Daniel looked at Marcus again, but this time he was seeing more than the driver who had been sitting in the vehicle. He was seeing a fellow professional who had spent years serving the same communities that officers like him were responsible for protecting. Marcus noticed the change in Daniel's expression. He understood that moments like this could easily become about embarrassment or conflict. But that was never what he wanted. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned that the strongest leaders did not use moments of authority to make others feel small. They used those moments to create understanding. "Officer Whitmore," Marcus said calmly, "I know you were doing your job." Daniel listened carefully. The response surprised him because it was not what he expected. Marcus was not angry. He was not trying to prove that he had more experience or a higher position. He was simply acknowledging that everyone involved had responsibilities. That was the kind of leadership Marcus believed in. A badge was not a reason to demand respect. It was a reason to show it. Daniel began reflecting on the interaction from the beginning. He thought about how quickly he had formed an opinion before knowing the complete story. He thought about how little he actually knew about the person standing in front of him. The lesson was not that he had stopped someone important. The lesson was that every person deserved to be treated with dignity before their achievements became known. Marcus had spent years learning that trust was built through actions, not assumptions. He had seen how one conversation could change the way people viewed each other. He believed that accountability was not about creating enemies. It was about recognizing mistakes and becoming better because of them. As more information became clear, the roadside scene transformed from a simple traffic stop into a moment of reflection. The same badge that represented authority for Daniel also represented responsibility for Marcus. They were not symbols of superiority. They were reminders of service. The night continued quietly around them, but the meaning of the encounter had changed completely. Daniel had started the evening believing he was evaluating a stranger. Now he understood that the person he questioned was someone who had dedicated his life to understanding the law, protecting others, and serving his community. And the biggest lesson was not about who had more authority. It was about who understood what authority was truly meant to represent. The most important lessons are not always learned when someone is proven wrong. Sometimes they are learned when someone finally understands why a mistake happened in the first place. On the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, the traffic stop that began as a simple interaction had become a moment of reflection for everyone involved. Officer Daniel Whitmore stood beside the road, looking at Marcus Reynolds with a completely different perspective than he had at the beginning of the evening. The person he thought he understood was now someone he respected. But Marcus did not want the moment to become about his position. He did not want recognition to replace understanding. He wanted the lesson behind the situation to remain the focus. As the conversation continued, Daniel asked Marcus about his experience in law enforcement. For the first time that night, they were no longer speaking as an officer questioning a driver. They were speaking as two people who shared a responsibility to serve others. Marcus explained that wearing a badge was never about having control over people. It was about being trusted with responsibility. He shared that every interaction mattered because the public remembered how they were treated, especially during moments when they felt uncertain. Daniel listened quietly. The words stayed with him because they reflected something he had always believed but had not fully considered. A badge represented authority, but it also represented accountability. Marcus understood this because he had spent years experiencing both sides of the responsibility. He had been the person answering questions. He had also been the person asking them. He knew how important it was for those in law enforcement to remain fair even when situations were unclear. Throughout his career as a sheriff's deputy, Marcus had learned that professionalism was not measured by how quickly someone could take control of a situation. It was measured by how carefully someone could handle it. He believed that patience was not a weakness. It was a sign of discipline. That belief shaped the way he approached every encounter. Daniel thought about the beginning of the traffic stop. He remembered how quickly he had created a picture of Marcus without knowing his background. He remembered focusing on what he could see instead of what he did not know. The realization was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. Growth often begins when people are willing to examine their own actions honestly. Meanwhile, word of the encounter began reaching others within the local law enforcement community. The story was no longer just about one roadside conversation. It became a reminder of how important it was for professionals to treat every person with fairness and respect. Sheriff Laura Bennett later learned about what happened and wanted to understand the full situation. She did not approach it with the goal of creating conflict. She approached it with the responsibility of making sure lessons were learned. Marcus supported that approach. He believed strong organizations were not built by pretending mistakes never happened. They were built by acknowledging challenges and improving because of them. As the evening came to an end, Daniel realized something that would stay with him for years. The person he believed needed to explain himself had actually taught him one of the most important lessons about his own profession. The law was not only about rules. It was about the people those rules were meant to serve. And Marcus Reynolds had shown that true leadership was not revealed by the power someone carried. It was revealed by the respect they showed when they had every reason to demand it. The most powerful moments of change often happen after the attention fades away. They happen when people return to their daily lives and have time to think about what they experienced. After the encounter on the quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, both Marcus Reynolds and Officer Daniel Whitmore carried the memory with them. The traffic stop had ended, but the lesson behind it was only beginning. For Marcus, the experience was another reminder of why he chose a life of service. He understood that difficult moments could reveal important truths about people and organizations. He also understood that not every mistake came from a lack of care. Sometimes mistakes came from people failing to see the full story in front of them. That was why Marcus believed conversations mattered. They created opportunities for people to understand each other. Daniel spent the following days thinking about everything that happened. He remembered the first moments of the traffic stop. He remembered how quickly he had formed an opinion before knowing who Marcus was. He remembered focusing on the situation instead of the person. Those thoughts stayed with him because they challenged the way he viewed his own responsibility. Daniel had always believed that law enforcement was about protecting people. But Marcus helped him understand that protection required more than following procedures. It required fairness, patience, and the ability to recognize the humanity of every person involved. Sheriff Laura Bennett reviewed the details of the encounter through the proper channels. She understood that leadership was not about ignoring difficult situations. It was about addressing them honestly and finding ways to improve. She spoke with members of the department about the importance of communication and professional judgment. The goal was not to create fear. The goal was to strengthen trust between law enforcement and the community they served. Marcus supported that approach because it matched his own beliefs. Throughout his career, he had learned that strong organizations were not created by pretending problems never existed. They were created by learning from challenges and becoming better because of them. Meanwhile, Daniel began looking at future interactions differently. He realized that every person he met had a story beyond what he could see in a single moment. A person's appearance, vehicle, or circumstances could never reveal their entire journey. That lesson became especially meaningful because Marcus had not asked for special treatment. He had not used his position to change the situation. He had simply asked to be treated with the same respect that everyone deserved. That was what stayed with Daniel the most. The person with the greatest authority in the situation was also the person who showed the most patience. Days later, when people discussed what happened, the focus was not on one officer or one traffic stop. The focus was on a larger lesson about responsibility. The badge was never meant to create distance between people. It was meant to represent service. Marcus Reynolds and Daniel Whitmore came from different perspectives, but that evening created an opportunity for both of them to understand something important. True professionalism was not measured by how much power someone had. It was measured by how responsibly they used it. And sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the people we almost fail to understand. Some moments are remembered not because of what happened in a single instant, but because of how they changed the people involved afterward. The quiet highway outside Savannah, Georgia, eventually returned to normal. The vehicles continued passing. The lights continued shining across the road. But for Marcus Reynolds and Officer Daniel Whitmore, that evening remained a powerful reminder of the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. Marcus returned to his duties as a sheriff's deputy with the same dedication he had always shown. He continued serving his community, responding to situations, and helping others understand the importance of fairness and trust. He never viewed the encounter as a chance to prove someone wrong. Instead, he viewed it as an opportunity to remind people of something simple. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity before their background, career, or accomplishments become known. Daniel also carried the lesson forward. The experience changed the way he approached his work. He became more aware of the importance of listening before judging and understanding before assuming. He realized that every person he encountered represented a story he might not know. A quick decision based only on appearance or a first impression could never reveal the complete truth. Over time, the encounter became an example within the department of why professional responsibility mattered. Sheriff Laura Bennett continued encouraging conversations about communication, fairness, and the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they served. She understood that trust was not built through words alone. It was built through consistent actions. The strongest departments were not those that claimed they never faced challenges. They were the ones willing to examine those challenges and grow from them. Marcus believed that was the true purpose of accountability. It was not about creating division. It was about creating improvement. The story of that evening spread because it represented something many people could understand. A person had been seen only through a limited perspective, and then the larger truth was revealed. But the most important part was not the discovery of Marcus's position. His title explained his career, but it did not define his character. His patience, professionalism, and respect were the qualities that truly revealed who he was. Years of service had taught Marcus that leadership was not about being recognized. It was about doing the right thing when recognition was not guaranteed. Daniel learned the same lesson from the opposite direction. He learned that authority was not measured by how quickly someone could control a situation. It was measured by how carefully someone could handle responsibility. In the end, the encounter between the white police officer and the black sheriff's deputy became more than a roadside conversation. It became a reminder that people are often more complex than the first impression they create. A badge can represent a position, but character determines what that badge truly means. And the greatest form of justice is not found when one person defeats another. It is found when truth creates understanding, and understanding creates change.